Welcome back to Ray's Talk Show. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Thank you so much for joining us. You can check Ray's Talk Show anywhere you can subscribe and download a podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever you're podcasting in digital audio pleasure. And you can check out all of our content at rayspodcast.com. That's RAYS podcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and what an incredible week. We have a great show on tap. Going to talk about the latest on AHCA, rhymes with Caca, Trump's attempt to put tens of millions of us in peril. And you'll hear my personal reflections on a sporting event that just took place that meant a lot to me. Of course, I'm referring to the World Baseball Classic and the swinging coquis, how our Boricua brothers did, and what the tournament meant for me, our family, and what I think it means for baseball and what it teaches us about our evolving society. The bulk of the time we're going to spend on today's show is we're going to be talking to a great friend to the show, lawyer, activist, philanthropist, Jose Sanchez. Jose runs a thriving law firm in East Texas, very interesting part of the country, an emerging community out there in the Longview and Tyler, Texas area. And so you're going to hear more from Jose. He talks about his incredible personal story as an immigrant to this country, talks about the human impact and what he sees as how the Trump administration is impacting immigrant communities day to day, what we can do as lawyers, as an activist, to help and support our immigrant brothers and sisters through these trying times, and just get Jose's perspective on what people are missing in the immigration debate and how we really should be addressing the bigger problem of our broken immigration system, and not just to slow the tide of undocumented immigration, but most importantly, to best utilize the greatest asset in this country, our human capital, our people, and probably the most unutilized resource we have in this country, young Latinos. So to get to the Caca segment of the show, for those that are not following, as I'm taping this late on a Thursday evening, we were supposed to have gotten a bill passed out of the House of Representatives, a healthcare, Obamacare repeal bill, but of course, the great negotiator, the great deal cutter, President Trump, once again couldn't seal the deal. And we are now left in limbo. There's talk that there may be a vote tomorrow. I'm optimistic that will not happen. And where this now lies is that to get it out of the House of Representatives, they have to convince mostly conservative members of what they call the Freedom Caucus, the very, very extreme right-wing members of our Congress, many of which came in through the Tea Party revolution in the 2010 federal cycle. And so what's ironic about this situation is that they don't like the bill because they don't think it's crappy enough. They want less people insured. And in fact, one of the essential items that they're debating in the 11th hour is they want the repeal of the essential health benefits. So this is, of course, the part of Obamacare that mandated that you could not kick people off health insurance because of pre-existing conditions, and you had to maintain a young adult who's on their parents' health insurance until 26 years old. So, in fact, they actually want less coverage. Less coverage. They don't like the bill because they think it should be crueler to poor people. The irony of this is that, and there's lots of little rules, lots of little things being debated. There's actually something called the Buffalo bailout, some obscure, basically, sweetener for the members, Republican House members in upstate New York. That basically is a little sweetheart deal for them on the side for their 2 or 3 votes. But the bottom line is that, the bill itself in its current form, and when they're tweaking it to make it worse they have to get at least 22 of these on the fence or people that are leaning no Republican members to vote for this thing, to get out of the House, just to get it out of the House. Senate's a whole ball of wax. But the irony of the situation is that these particular elements of the bill, as it relates to the parts that are going to, in many ways, impact people the most, seniors, poor people, people that potentially could be on opioids, other addictions, other pre-existing conditions. The irony of it is that this particular bill and the iterations that they're tweaking impact their constituency the most. The working poor in the quote-unquote white working class of the industrial Midwest. You know, I have a brother, Ray Collazo, Planetary, Army of the Pharaohs Clique, Outer Space Group, who's a hip-hop artist who's traveled the country for many years. And the biggest thing when he went to places like, Nebraska and Oregon and, the middle America, was he started to see the beginning of this opioid meth addiction coming, for the last 5-6 years. And it's incredible that instead of thinking about, okay, how do we address this crisis, which, by the way, is just a continuation of the crisis that the minority communities and inner city communities have been dealing with for decades. In the 80s, I was a child of North Philadelphia, and I saw my relatively calm, working class, multicultural community of Puerto Ricans, Filipinos, African Americans, Italians. There were still a few white folks around back then in North Philly. That, the Reagan administration with their policies, essentially through the mischief that was happening in Central America, our community was attacked through the flood of drugs, cocaine, heroin, and others, narcotics that came in our communities in the early 80s. And when we spoke up and said, this is not only a community crisis from a crime and safety perspective, it's also a health crisis because so many of our people are being poisoned by these drugs. We were told by Nancy Reagan to just say no. And many people in our community, particularly our males, were thrown in prison. The beginning of the prison industrial complex of this country in many ways. And so now we fast forward 30 years later, and we have, because our voices were not heard in our issue, the answer by elected officials, Republicans and Democrats on the federal level, when we cried out for help, cried out for assistance for job development so our young men would not be tempted to do this, and to deal with these issues from a humanitarian and health perspective, the answer the solution we got was to throw more of us in prison. And so many of us live in fear. You go to North Philadelphia where I grew up, and most people have bars all over their house. People are prisoners in their own home, unfortunately. And so now we fast forward to decades later, and now this opioid addiction in these communities like the Ohios, the Western Pennsylvanias, the Oregons, the Wisconsins, the Iowas, even in New England states. And these communities are crying out for help. They cried for help last year. And this president says, I got you. I know it's a problem. I got you. And in their desperation, they vote for this man. Many of them, not all of them, many of them. Many of the families impacted by the scourge of drug abuse in this country. And this con man, one of the things that's now coming out, that's very clear, it was always clear to me, and apparently it was clear to Mitt Romney and Marco Rubio and others, was that this man's not a great negotiator. He's not a great businessman. He's not a great, salesman. He's just a freaking con artist. And now they're seeing these people that are crying out in their moment of need for hope. They were sold that, doubling down on their whiteness and doubling down on identifying the boogeyman being Muslims and Mexicans, that ultimately was going to be what was going to be their salvation, eliminating and squashing the multicultural members of our society, that would solve their problem. Their kids wouldn't be on opioids. They would have a job, and all would be right with the world again. Well, guess what? Y'all got played pretty bad. And if this bill, any version of this bill, whether it gets a little worse, I mean, they're talking this new CBO scores 26 million off their health care, and it's getting worse and worse every time they look at the numbers. It's their administration telling you this, people. And in the midst of doing this, when you're crying out for help, you're drowning in an ocean. They're not only pulling, they're not even throwing the raft out, that boat is driving away from you. That cruise ship is leaving you. And you're going to continue to drown if you don't wake up. And we are to sit here, and of course, lo sentimos mucho. We've been through it. All we ask is that we work together so we can solve this problem mutually. You know, I was listening to another podcast earlier, and they were explaining, and I have to get this, I believe the gentleman's name is Sam Quinones, he's a Latino guy. Apparently, someone wrote a book about this phenomenon, how basically in these working class areas, the medical community, instead of dealing with people's injuries, working on, in labor work through therapy and, kind of a longer process, they just drug people up so they can get them back to work fast. And so, as I said, legal scholars, economic and health scholars who are writing this research are identifying this. I said it on Facebook the other day. Y'all problem ain't Mexicans. Y'all problem is big pharma. So let's work on that together. We have common ground here. Let's resist. For those, we still have time. Call your Republican members of Congress, particularly those moderates or those that are on the fence. If you're in South Florida, Congressman Golbello, over 70,000 people in his district in South Florida and in stretching into the Naples area would lose their health insurance if this bill passes in its current form. You're in Colorado, Congressman Mike Kaufman. You're in the Central Valley of California, Congress people Denham, Valadao, Nunes. Well, Nunes got other issues. My man going to do some time for Trump. These Hurd, you live out in western Texas, you're listening to this, parts of San Antonio, parts of the extended El Paso area. Congressman Mike Hurd, these people are going to make the decision, ultimately. The decision's in their hands, whether this bill passes out of the House or not. Call 866-426-2631, 866-426-2631, put in your zip code, and you'll be passed into these people's offices. We've got to resist. We have them on the ropes. We have to keep pushing. We got to knock them out. We know about, let me tell you something. My people, Tito Trinidad is from my people. In our culture, we know to win the fight, ultimately, you got to knock them out. Let's knock these people out. The other thing I'll say about the current AHCA, rhymes with Caca discussion, the Obama repeal bill, is this just clearly shows how none of the business mores, other than maybe just, faking it till you make it, and maybe, social and Twitter, none of the social business mores that people were sold for this man supposedly had are there. This is someone that's negotiating this deal by, first of all, not being able to convince his own caucus, his own party to just vote for the damn bill because it's so bad, and he's so bad at, or he doesn't even know what's in it. But he's put a deadline on the vote, and if it doesn't happen tomorrow, this is all over. Obamacare remains. It's incredible as time goes on, we realize how lousy a manager this man is. Skeletal staff. Very few people still hired in key political appointments in administration. We basically don't have a Department of State anymore. No one works there. Tillerson's vacationing in Russia most of the time. He doesn't seem particularly interested in the job at this point. He's not going to the next NATO meeting. Very dangerous times. This man's a con. I mean, we should have listened to Senator Rubio. Former Governor Romney. They knew it all along. This is right in our face. And let me tell you something, for those people that don't believe me. Do you have to have a relative die? It's very clear. The CBO score. Conservatives in the House. Moderates in the House. The American Hospital Association. The Medical Nurse Association. Medical Doctor Association. Pediatric Association. ARP. This bill sucks. Over 20 million people lose their coverage. That doesn't include how many people will have cost prohibitive coverage. We need more seniors eating cat food to survive because of their health expenses. We need more people flooding emergency rooms because they don't have health expenses. You end up paying for it anyway, people. Wake up and resist. We got them on the ropes. We got to knock them out. Like LL said, Mama said, knock you out. Knock them out, people. Let's listen to my man, Jose Sanchez, and I'll come back and talk about the sports Xanadu that I've been living over the last several days.
Yes, Ray. So obviously my story all comes back from Mexico. I was born in Mexico, and like many immigrants, my father was working up here in Texas in the ranches and the dairies. And when I was about 5 years old, my mother said, hey, I don't want this kind of lifestyle. You coming over there, you just coming here for 2 months and 10 months in the U.S. Either you stay here in Mexico or we go back with you to Texas. And so like many families, we came here undocumented in the summer of 81, floated the Rio Grande River like a lot of people, and luckily didn't get caught, and ended up here in East Texas, as you can tell from my accent, where we grew up since I was 5. And I've been raised here in East Texas in Longview. We're about 2 hours east of Dallas and an hour from the Louisiana-Shreveport border. And I've been raised here ever since I was 5 until the present. So that's where my history comes from. My parents are neither of them went to school, didn't get the opportunity because of the conditions in Mexico and them having to work at a very young age. So I've been able to take the opportunity from them, their hard work ethic that they have, to be raised here in East Texas, where it's back in 82, were barely any Latinos or immigrants here in the United States. And now it's roughly 20%. But using all that, luckily I had a good education, a good high school, a good school system here in East Texas to be getting a good education.
And,
Go ahead.
And Jose, you obviously could have done a lot of things, and your life could have went in a lot of different directions. And you and I share the same story in that, our parents, their journeys are just incredible. And, it's easy. What we end up accomplishing is easy compared to what their struggles they had to go through. But I'm curious why the legal career? Because you're not only a lawyer, but you're someone that, it's one of the things you're proudest of in life. Knowing you on a personal level, you really have a passion for your calling, and I'm curious what led you to serve in this way.
Yeah, that's a great question that I always get when I speak to kids and to audiences. And what's interesting, I went to Texas A&M to be a marketing. My degree is marketing, international business. I love sports, all kind of sports. And so I wanted to come up with with advertising campaigns in Central and South America for Nike. That was my dream job, to go work for Nike. I worked selling tennis shoes, the Jordans, all the new shoes. So I've always had a love for apparel and athletic stuff. And so that was my dream. That's why I got a degree. And it wasn't until I was at A&M my senior year, my junior year, the second half of my junior year, when I started getting involved politically, because prior to that, I grew up with all it was all Caucasian people. I didn't even know the culture and the atmosphere of Latinos, because there wasn't any in my school. They lived on the other side of town. And so when I went to A&M, was my first time encounter to really hang out and have Latino friends. So I started hanging out with more of them in their clubs and the environments, playing sports. And eventually I ran for president to represent the Latinos organizations there at A&M. And so my senior year I did that. And so when I did that, or got involved with it, I said, hey, I really like representing Latinos and representing people, make sure they have their say-so heard. And I said, well, I might as well go to law school. And that's how it all began, because I had never in my life, I thought I would be a lawyer. Even when I was young, my parents said, I never said I was going to be a lawyer or wanted to be a lawyer. So I think that came from the atmosphere of college and making sure that Latinos were getting their voice heard, and said, hey, I might as well go to law school. So that's how it began, Ray.
What's really great about your story, Jose, is that you really combine service with having seeing the advantages of that life presents to you. So, for example, some people would say, well, maybe it's a disadvantage to be from East Texas and be a Latino, and the network is, I know we're always bugging you about, why don't you move to Dallas or Houston or one of the bigger city communities and run for office, do other things. And you really have dedicated yourself from a personal perspective, but also a business perspective, to East Texas and the community you're from. Can you talk a little bit about what why you've made that choice, not only on a personal level, but for business reasons, which I think is very interesting?
Well, yeah. So right after I got out of law school, I went to law school at Texas Tech in Lubbock. I had several opportunities to go to Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, all the bigger cities, and work for law firms. But at that time in 2001, there weren't any Latino lawyers in East Texas. And so I had read numerous books at A&M about demographics change here in Texas, how it was all going to change and the Latinos were going to be the majority. And so I came back to East Texas to a law firm that my friend's dad was a lawyer, and he hired me. And so I got a job, and I said, hey, I want to come out here in East Texas. There's nobody here. It's the beginning. There's a lot of immigrant communities. There's very, very few professional Latinos. So there's a lot of grassroots type of work that needed to be done. And so that's why I decided to come back to Longview in East Texas instead, for the opportunity to be hands-on with the community, and also to have an impact on the immigrant community that's going to be growing, that I knew was going to be growing, and also what I could do to help them out. So that's what I did. My intention was to get some experience, which I did with other law firms. But my goal eventually was to open up my own law firm and do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, help who I wanted to help, and charge whatever I wanted to help. So I think it was a mixture of both, of the opportunity to be at the grassroots level of something new, this immigrant wave, and also the opportunity because there was nobody here to do it. So I fulfilled a need that needed to do that. And that was 2001. So you're looking at 15 years later, and now, there's still not enough attorneys here for the immigrant community. But because I did that, I've been able to have success because I was one of the first ones to get involved with the community and gain their trust over the years.
You talked about not only just the Latino community, but the immigrant Latino community. How did your practice develop this particular expertise around immigrant law and servicing the legal issues of immigrant Latinos?
Well, when I worked for the other law firms when I first started, we didn't do immigration. I just did personal injury, learned how to do car wrecks. We would get Latino or immigrant clients, but we didn't do immigration. So people would call all the time, hey, Jose, do you do immigration? I said, no, we don't do that. We don't do that because my boss didn't want me to do that. But I always kind of knew that I would probably eventually do it. So when I went on my own in 2005, I learned how to do immigration. I went to seminars, I downloaded stuff, I read books, I talked to other lawyers that were immigration lawyers in Deep East Texas and Dallas, and they helped me out. I went to conferences. So I gradually just learned how to do immigration by myself because I knew that was an opportunity to get more clients because there was nobody in our area, local area, that was doing that. And so there was a need. And so that's how that came about to doing immigration. The good thing is that I had already learned how to do personal injury. I started learning how to do criminal, family, probate, civil litigation, because this growing immigrant community, they didn't have very, very few immigrant attorneys that could really communicate with them and knew their culture and their language. So really I had to learn how to do everything. It was more like a general practice because of the need in the community. And that's how that kind of began us to get into immigration. Luckily, with all that immigration in 2005, as you recall, all the marchas that were going on in 2006 with the proposal of Bush maybe passing immigration reform came at the right time. And I helped lead a march there in Tyler. Was the first time the immigrants had ever gotten together in a march. We had about 4,000 people. And after that kind of, set me up to kind of be more of a leader in the East Texas community with the immigrants. And, I went on to help out on a regional or state or national level with more marchas that we did for the immigrant community. And so I think I came at the right time with the immigrant movement and all these marches and making a national issue at the same time, learning how to do it here in practice and helping people here in East Texas to help them in their immigrant law needs.
I remember Jose, our great mutual friend that introduced us, in Trejo. I remember him. We met at a LULAC conference in Puerto Rico. Talk about a great atmosphere. And I remember I think it was within the first day that you and I met.
Yeah.
But you showing me the pictures and talking about that march. And I remember how proud you were because it really was a turning point in your mind for the Latino community in the whole region. Standing up to say, we're invested in this community. We're part of this community. And that was just a critical fork in the road for immigration policy in this country. And I think the immigrant Latino community saying, basta ya, we're going to stand up for ourselves. And so I just remember with all the things you could have been showing off about in your legal career and your business career, that was the first thing you wanted me to know about how proud. That was a very proud moment for you in your life. And I think that speaks to why you do what you do. And you're listening to Jose Sanchez, great friend to the show. It's been too long. And I want people to know I always, we need to have more Texans on the show. And we need to have Jose more on the show, giving that perspective. And of course, Hermano, another great friend, Fernando Trevino, who's a proud Mexicano, but lives out in the East Coast by me. So those are the friends that brought me and Jose together. So always always great to talk to our great friend Jose. Jose, I wanted to ask you, the one of the things that for people like you and I, it's really frustrating is that these very tired arguments that are very, these anti-Latino, anti-immigrant arguments around, well, it's, and it usually goes along 2 or 3 different modes. It's, it's not that we don't like immigration. It's people that don't do it the quote unquote right way. My family came here legally. Why don't you guys? And it's just kind of this same kind of tired thing. And one of the things you're so close to is just from a very practical legal perspective, whether it's enforcement, whether it's just the rules about how people immigrate here legally, and how difficult that can be, and then even the process for people to stand up for their own rights as immigrants. You're on the front lines of that. So if you could just share a story or some thoughts about for people that maybe just don't understand how our legal system causes some of these tensions and issues. And I'd be love for you to share your thoughts about what you're seeing on the ground that you think would be helpful to know for people that just don't understand that part of this policy conversation.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I get that every day, all the time when I speak to different people or different groups. And, the big argument about, well, we don't need to pass an immigration reform. We just need to enforce the current laws, and people need to do it the right way. And I think it's important that people understand what they think is the right way and really what it is the right way. First, I think from my opinion is the immigration laws we have are outdated. There's a lot of them that need to be adjusted and modified due to the increase in demand of immigrants coming in here. And really, in a nutshell, because I could spend hours and hours teaching a class just on this certain issue and this question. But the main thing that people need to understand that aren't really familiar with immigration, that might have that thought about doing it the right way, is that you got to understand what the people that try and do it the right way, what they have to go through to do it the right way. And one of the first things that I always tell people is, if you don't have a family relative, so if you don't have a husband or spouse or a sibling or a parent or a child that's over 21 years of age, you can't even apply to even get in line. So that's one of the first things that people think is like, well, there should be other ways to do it. But if you don't have that immediate relative, you don't even get to apply. Second, even if you do apply through one of them, depending on the person, it can take years before you even get the opportunity to come to the United States or get a resident card. And all that's because of the supply and demand, and also because of Congress. According to the Congress statutes, there's only so many hundreds of thousands of visas that are allowed per year for everybody total, and then every country can't get more than 15% of the total. And so what it does is, with these immigrant countries such as Mexico, China, India, and Philippines, those are the 4 ones that get punished the most, because there's so many demand from those countries. So it causes this backlog. So while you might apply through your brother or through your sister or through your parent because of the backlog, if you're from one of those 4 countries, it creates this huge backlog that could last 15 or 20 years before you can even come in legally into the United States, or if you're here already undocumented, to get your actual legal status. And so what it does is creates this separation of families, and people aren't going to wait that long to be away from your family just to come here and unite. And so I think there's the big picture is, because of the way it's written, then it's hard for them to do it, and it's hard for people that that do it that don't understand the system and think we just do it the right way, because they've never been separated from their families, they've never been apart or been torn apart, or would say, hey, you can't see your mother for the next 20 years because until then you're not going to be legal. Well, I think they would have a change of mind and different thought if they were in that situation to really understand how these people go through. So that's just a very small amount of that answer to your question, Ray. But I think there's a lot of things that could be done without a comprehensive reform that could alleviate a lot of the pains and the separation of the families that might, be able to take care of a majority of the immigrants that are already here without doing a whole full reform to the whole country. So that's just an example of why it's hard to do it the legal way, because of the time and because of the ways the laws are written.
Yeah, no, and it's about kind of matching the labor needs and the economic needs of the country with having what did your governor once say, have a heart, as it relates to just kind of what kind of morals and ethics does our country have around this concept of having smart policy that's good for the economy but also our families. And look, the reality is that immigrants, regardless of their legal status, don't live in isolation. So many of us live in mixed families, where you have people of various statuses in the same household of different generations. And so, paperwork doesn't separate the love we have for each other. And we have a South American woman who's friends of ours through church, who basically had to make a decision. She was undocumented, and her mother was dying in her country in South America, and she had to make a call. Am I going to see my mother again, but give up the life that I have here? And she decided to go back home to be with her mother and be her caregiver. And quite honestly, she's, we keep in touch with her, and she struggles because, her mother, while she's very happy to be with her mother in these last days, once her mother passes, she'll still be a pretty young woman who's now separated from the family she had here. So in the life she had here. So it's these are gut-wrenching decisions that no one should have to make. And for people do need to understand the history. When the white various European groups came at the end of the 18th and beginning of the 19th century, we essentially had periods in this country where we didn't have immigration policy. It was basically come one, come all. We needed the labor. Our country was growing at that point, the industrial age. And so, the Italians and the Irish and the Germans and everyone else, you may think your great granddad came the quote unquote legal way, but there basically weren't laws because they were taking advantage of the labor pool at the time. You listen to Jose Sanchez, great friend, legal mind advocate, philanthropist, based out of East Texas. He's got the best accent I know. Another great friend of ours, Chuck Rocha, another East Texas player with the accents. We're always talking about you out in D.C. We got to get you out to the East Coast more, Jose, and always great to hear from you. Jose, remind people where they can find, before we get to your thoughts on the Trump administration and its impact on your folks down in Texas. Remind people where they can find you on social media and anything else you'd like to share about your law firm.
Yes, Ray. I'm very easy. I'm very active on the social media. Y'all can look me up on Facebook, just Jose Sanchez, attorney, Longview, or Jose Sanchez Law Firm. You can follow me on there. As well, I have just Jose's Law at Jose's Law is my Twitter account. Not as much there as I am on Facebook. I do have a radio show every Saturday, Ray. It's in Español, La Ley con Jose. And it's on, you can find the link on my website, attorneysanchez.com or miabogadosanchez.com. And there's a link to the radio station, which is mega993.com, mega.993.com. and you can it's streamed on the internet, so you can listen to that show every Saturday from 12 to 1. And La Ley Conoce, I've been doing it for about 8 years. So very active. Yeah, but if you go to my website, attorneysanchez.com, you can get all my history, all my information. There's a way for you to ask legal questions through an email, and we try and respond if it's very brief. And so, as you said, I do a lot of immigration, but also do a lot of personal injury. I've been able to get millions of dollars for people when they get hurt. And as well, I have a lot of experience in criminal and civil litigation cases as well.
And we'll get back to Jose Sanchez, a great friend to the show and a great activist, someone who I think you'll see eventually be a rising political star in this country. Get his thoughts actually on the first months of the Trump administration and some other hot issues that are happening that are impacting our friends in the great state of Texas. But I did want to chat for a moment about my personal experience and what I think our lesson should be out of a sporting event that took place over the last few weeks. I've personally been in a sports Xanadu, the World Baseball Classic, which is a relatively new tournament. It's only been the 4th edition of this tournament. It's sort of like an Olympic-style, World Cup-style tournament for baseball, featuring, the United States, the Latino countries, and the Asian countries, and really now, countries all over the world, in a really neat baseball tournament. And so for folks that haven't been watching it, the island of Puerto Rico really and the Puerto Rican community at large really dominated the tournament. Finished in second place only to the very powerful and capable United States team, whose ace pitcher and several other players were of Puerto Rican descent. On several levels, this tournament and these few weeks meant a lot to me. I am the sports fan, the baseball fan, and really, in some ways, the Puerto Rican that I am today, because my grandfather, Don Rafael Collazo, grew up literally across the street from one of the Winter League stadiums in Caguas, Puerto Rico. Actually, the team that won the Caribbean Series this year hadn't won it in decades. And so in those years, the team had incredible Negro League stars, the great Latin American players of the era, and even made, other American major leaguers. So he saw some real good ball back then. And so he passed along the love of baseball to us. And so, to see, first of all, from a baseball level, the quality of particularly this new generation of Puerto Rican star players. So if you can imagine, names like Carlos Correa, Francisco Lindor, Javier Baez, we essentially have this generation's, Derek Jeter, Alex Rodriguez, and Cal Ripken on the same team. And so just a lot of excitement, a lot of fire. Yadier Molina is an incredible Hall of Fame catcher and leader. And just on many levels, this team was a great source of pride for our community, not only as athletes, but as leaders, people that really showed what our community, the talents and the spirit of cariño that we bring to our community and our world. It brought our diaspora together. There's over 8 million Puerto Ricans throughout the world. And from coast to coast, from the island to the Bronx, to Orlando, to LA, to San Diego, we were all enthralled and we were one. And so I just, it meant so much to me on many levels as a Puerto Rican that really, even though really living my entire life in the mainland United States, really on some level still feels displaced and feels almost like a refugee, and how colonialism and the economics of the relationship between the United States and Puerto Rico led to my family's a few generations back coming to the mainland, and still, and regardless of our decades being here and being proud Americans, still feeling and contributing a lot to this country, still feeling Puerto Rican, and still feeling on some level una falta que no crió en la isla, and I wasn't raised with my cousin, all of my cousins, and there's still a longing there. And as a baseball fan, as a Puerto Rican baseball fan, it was just spectacular. Great job by all the teams, all the countries. I believe, as our friend Alberto Vasallo said on social media today, something that's going to be a big part of the sporting landscape for years to come. The attendance figures and the interest was just much bigger than it had ever been. And so I'm looking forward to enjoy World Baseball Classics, and I thank my friends that dealt with my obnoxiousness over the last few weeks. And some of you, especially you Puerto Ricans, reveled in it because we were all being very obnoxious. So much respect to los nuestros, and siga adelante, mi gente. Incredible, by the way, when Puerto Ricans are given the opportunity to independently manage themselves, how professional and well organized and spectacular we can be. So just a little note there. I want to finish my comments on the World Baseball Classic and the Puerto Rico team by sharing a post that a great friend to the show and a tremendous Latina activist in Central Florida, Nilmarie Zapata Colon, put on her Facebook today. I hope she doesn't mind me reading this. But Nilmarie was tagged a video of the Puerto Rican team praying right after their loss in the finals against the United States. Again, even in a moment of sadness and disappointment, thanking God for this time where this incredible collection of essentially 3 generations of legendary baseball players got to work together as players, veterans, young boys, and coaches. So Nilmarie's thoughts about the end of the game and a moment when the team got on the knee to thank God for this time together. This video just makes me choke every time. To see such a perfect moment that captures humility, grace, and honor. It showcases what is most important: God, spirit, community, and fellowship. That is truly a win and an example for our communities of what real unity is. They kept what lies within at the center of it all. Well said, Nilmarie. I could have said it better myself, but if you got to have something said, get a strong woman to say it. Really captured the spirit of what I was thinking. And siga adelante los rubios, Team Puerto Rico, y pa'lante mi gente. Let's listen to Jose Sanchez, great friend to the show, one of our great Texas buddies. Continue our conversation. His thoughts about the new administration and his concerns and his how he's helping immigrant families survive and understand they have rights, even in these very trying times.
But no, it's like many of y'all. I was very disappointed that I was a Hillary Clinton delegate, national delegate, so I went to Philly on her behalf, and I was obviously very looking forward to having her as president. But now, since Trump's taken over, like everybody else, I'm just shocked at what's going to be next? What's he going to do next? What is he going to tweet next? What is his staff going to do to try and cover up a lot of the stuff he's done or we find out that he has done? And so it's frustrating as a person that follows politics, that is very involved in politics and policy, to see somebody like him be president. I'm sure he's a good businessman in the aspect that he's made money and he's done some other things, whether they're shady or not. But as to be president, it's still hard for me to understand and believe that in America we would elect somebody like him as his character, as his person. And so that's still hard for me to understand as a country. But as his policies, obviously, I disagree with numerous of his policies. And I think in time, we're going to find out a lot of stuff that he is doing, that he shouldn't be doing, and a lot of stuff that he said he's going to do can't do because of the politics and the money that goes into it. So it's hard for me to really have respect for him. I have respect for the office, not so much respect for him as a person. But it's going to be interesting what comes next. Obviously, we're all hearing the things are going. I can tell you from the community here in Texas, in the immigrant community, I've been bombarded. I've been very busy since he's taken office, and every time he opens his mouth, I get busier, it seems. And people are just scared and they're feared, and that's why I'm doing a lot of consultations, a lot of people asking a lot of questions. What's going to go on? Am I going to get deported? Can I keep my green card? What's he going to change, and all these kind of stuff. So it's a lot of education to the community so they can understand what he can't do and what he can do, so they don't have the fear that's going on every time he opens his mouth. So it's going to be interesting, Ray, for the next couple years as to what's going to go on if he makes it that long, to find out exactly what he's capable of doing. And so it's it's a sad time in our country, but also it's a time for us to maybe get more people involved in this whole process for the next time there's elections. They will have more input.
One of the saddest things that I'm hearing a lot about recently is whether it's legal lawyers like yourself or advocates helping families put together their documentation and prepare for guardianship uh, issues. So, a parent or parents who need to who want to put in place steps so that there's someone that legally can be the guardian of their citizen children, so that they're not put in foster care limbo. So I don't know if that's stuff you're doing, but can you just share a little bit about Jose, kind of as a lawyer dealing with the immigrant community, kind of just on a personal level, how the struggles with trying to help people through these real personal, uncertain times.
Yeah, Ray. I mean, something that ever since Trump took over, I'm always trying to be very creative on coming up things that I can help the community, and I always try and educate the community. That's a very big thing of mine, is to get them educated. So when this happened, obviously a lot of people that have kids, especially, are scared. What's going to happen if I get caught? If I get detained? If I get deported? What's going to happen to my assets? What's going to happen to my kids? And so what we've done here at my office. What we've done is we created what's called an emergency plan, and what it encompasses is people come in for a consultation. I sit down with a husband and wife, or if they're single, and they give me the history of themselves, and then I analyze, see if there's any current way for them to become legal, and we go that way if we can. If not, then I tell them what their rights are. I tell them what to do in case they get detained, what they need to do if they're in jail, and the ICE tries to talk to them. Why, ways they have a right to an immigration bond. They shouldn't sign anything to get sent back to their country. They're going to pressure them and try and get them to sign a voluntary departure so they can get back the next day. And so we do that, a lot of education and telling them. But the other thing that we're doing, Ray, that I think is pretty great for the community, is in this emergency plan that we're doing, we're going ahead and preparing a power of an attorney for the wife to the spouse, and also a power of attorney from the spouse to the other spouse. So they have mutual power of attorneys. In case one of them gets caught, the other parent has power of attorney of the one that's detained. But also in those power of attorneys, we're putting a secondary person on the power of attorneys on both of them. In case they both get caught, they have a secondary person that can take care of both of them while they're detained. And as well, we're doing a power of a temporary guardianship for the kids, so they can appoint somebody to be in charge of the kids. And also we're doing a medical power of attorney for the health of the kids. They're two separate documents here in Texas, so we have to do both of those in case they get caught. And then the other thing we do, Ray, is I get them to go ahead and sign what's called a G-28, which is a notice of appearance through immigration, that I'm their attorney of record. So we get them to sign each one of those, and then we tell them to bring their birth certificates. We tell them to bring the birth certificate from the kids. If they have a pending application from a brother or a parent or some other form, we tell them to bring that. And we prepare all that. We prepare their attorneys. We prepare all this stuff. And then they come and pick up this packet. We put it in a real nice red folder that says emergency plan on it with their name on it. And then inside that has all the power of attorneys, has everybody's birth certificates, has everything they're going to need, and it also has detailed information that I've gathered from the internet about what to do if they come to your house, just to reemphasize them what their rights are. And we give it to them. And now for the next, as long as Trump is president this first term, if they ever get detained, since I already have all their information and they already signed that I'm their attorney, it is my responsibility, and included in that plan is my fees to try and help them get out as soon as possible the moment that they get detained. And so this whole plan is to get them prepared, so in case one of them or both of them get detained, they already know who's taking care of their kids, they already know who's taking care of their assets, and they already know that attorneys are already on the outside trying to get them out as soon as possible. So this is a way to prepare them to get everything in place in case that happens during this whole administration.
One of the things that our listeners, some they come from very diverse backgrounds, but most of them, I would imagine, aren't dealing with this particular situation, but they not only they have neighbors, they have family members, and this is the kind of information, this is the kind of opportunity for people to really be advocates. So even if you're not a lawyer, learning more about these options, learning about who are the local attorneys in your community that have the kind of expertise like Jose, reaching out to people like Jose, so that you likely have relationships within your family and your community and your church. You can spread this kind of information because unfortunately, and we know this too well, Jose, is that a lot of people get victimized because of their concerns and a lack of understanding of these processes, get victimized by people from our communities, notarios, and a lot of fraud takes place. People are well-intentioned, just trying to find this kind of basic information, and people are taking advantage of, or they just don't know what resources are available to them. So for people out there that want to help people that are in this very tragic situation, they're living in fear, but they have to make contingency plans because of their children and their relatives that they may be separated from, that it's very important that you help spread the word. And again, visit Jose's website, go to reach out to him and other attorneys that have this kind of level of expertise. Jose, what else would you like people to know about either what's happening in Texas or from your perspective in Texas that's important for our country to know in this moment in history? We have one of the things that I'm very passionate about is, as a Puerto Rican, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this issue is that people like you, people of our generation that may have even been legalized through the immigration bill in the early 80s, thinking about, we have two members of Congress who were children of that era, the Congressman Q and our great mutual friend and Congressman Espaillat from New York, that were our generation that came to this country as undocumented children. And because they were given this opportunity, are now serving our country in U.S. Congress. We have members of the military who have been deported after serving our country. So there's these policies are so unproductive for, with all the talent that people like Jose and others bring to the table. And this new generation of dreamers are not given that full opportunity and how much more they could be contributing. So Jose, just any other thoughts you have from your perspective about these times that you'd like to share with our Ray's Talk Show listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to, let y'all know what's going on here in Texas. And, Texas is, we're a big state, and obviously it's Republican, but I think eventually it won't be. But right now in legislature was something that I think is very important that everybody needs to hear, and I think it's going on in other states, is this whole movement by our governor, Greg Abbott, which is called Senate Bill 4, which is basically as a sanctuary bill. And what he's doing is that he's saying that all the counties, sheriffs, police departments, cities have to abide and help ICE get immigrants. And when they detain them, they have to call them and they have to work with them. And if they choose not to, then he's going to cut their state funding for that entity. And so what it's created is, these counties and cities are having to decide, are we going to get this funding from the state, or are we going to help immigration? So we can help immigration, or we're not going to help immigration. And so what we've seen is several of the counties, the bigger counties like Travis County and other counties in Harris, my friend, the sheriff, Ed Gonzalez in Harris County, said, hey, we're not going to do that. We're not going to abide by ICE because it doesn't make sense. And so, I wish we could all be like Philadelphia, and have those things in place that y'all have about not abiding by these ICE holds and detainers. But we're not at that point. There's some cities, but I think as a state, we're not there yet. The good thing is, Ray, that we have a lot of people fighting against this bill. It passed in the Senate, but we don't think it's even going to get on the floor in the House. So I think it has a lot of problems. So hopefully it never comes out. And even if it does come out, obviously Malduff and LULAC and some other organizations are already ready to follow suit the moment it becomes effective. But I think from the moral point of view, it's showing what the Republican Party is doing here in Texas, and they don't care. They're going everywhere to split up families to create this fear. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens later in the future with this party, as they know that eventually demographically it's changing, and eventually the Latinos are going to take over Texas.
You know, and I saw State Representative Rafael Anchia. I mean, he was a little out of character. He's normally a pretty reserved guy. And when they were discussing this bill on the House floor, he basically called out his members and said, look, this is racist. You know, he's like, I don't like to talk this way, but, you know, that's what this is. And, you know, it's caused a lot of emotions. And this is an opportunity for our friends, particularly in Texas, to get involved on the state level. Some of the federal stuff can be very daunting to feel like, what can one person do? But, you know, to keep this bill off the House floor in Texas would be a big accomplishment for us. And I know there's a lot of good leadership doing it. We're going to keep talking about that issue on the show. And I'm glad you put that on the table, because these state battles, particularly in Texas, you know, there's hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of Latinos that don't have health care, even though they was made available to them through the Affordable Care Act several years ago. But because Republican governors have blocked just taking the money for the people in the quote-unquote Medicaid gap, there's working people, almost many of them, if not the majority of them, Black and Latino, who are, you know, who would have health insurance in Texas right now if this Republican-led state government would just take the money that the federal government has offered for them for several years. And so, and that's a phenomenon, unfortunately, we're dealing with around the country. So whether it's repressive voting rights laws, and that's an issue that I know, Jose, you're keeping a very close eye on, and that's still in federal court around the Texas voter ID law. That's actually, I think, right at this point been blocked, fortunately. The issue you're talking about, all kind of crazy stuff happening off and on at the state legislative level in Texas. So we have to be diligent. And, you know, Texas politics is really the future of this country, because once we overcome the repressive voting rights laws, once we get to our full voting power in Texas, and we start electing Governor Sanchez, Senator Castro, then not only does Texas change, but the whole country changes, because from a political, geographic perspective, it's really all the Republican Party has left. I mean, it's you take Texas off the map, and it becomes a very regional political party. So, Jose Sanchez, you've been such a wonderful guest, and you're always a great friend and leader for our community. Always proud of you, brother. And, you know, I tease you about the Cowboy stuff, but, you know, hey, I'm an Eagle fan. That's what we do. We're obnoxious. But remind people again where they can find you on social media, and anything else you'd like to share on the show.
Yeah, no, well, first, thanks, Ray, for having me on your show. You know, I listen quite often, and thanks for the friendship and everything you do for the community as well. And, you know, we're here to help people. You know, that's the reason I became a lawyer. There's other things I could be doing to make a lot more money, and I know you as well. We could be doing more, but at the end of the day, it's not about money. It's about making a difference in the lives of everybody, but obviously specifically to the people that we're accustomed to helping. So thank you for that. And obviously people can follow me on my website, attorneysanchez.com, or you can go to my Facebook, Jose Sanchez Law Firm, here in Longview, Texas, and or as well as on my personal Facebook as well with that. And so anything I can do for y'all to help y'all out, or have questions or comments or concerns about any kind of law, obviously I can try and help you. If not, I'll find the right person that can do that. So hopefully we can keep in touch, Ray, with this, and hopefully you'll invite me back again with some other people. Maybe we'll have some little debates or something. But I enjoyed it, and hopefully we can continue this. And thanks for having me on the show.
For sure. I'm just hoping that I can tag along with you to go see Canelo GGG in Vegas at some point this year. We definitely got to connect soon, Jose. And you've been listening to Jose Sanchez. And the last thing I want to share with you, Jose, is that my oldest son snuck down from his room to listen to us tape the last 10 minutes of the show. And he's going to be my lawyer. He loves to debate. He loves to argue. You talk about a negotiator. He knows how to get what he wants. So, yeah, bro. So he's been listening to the last few minutes of the show, and he likes your style. He said, man, this guy has a cool accent. So he's like you, Troy. He's a lawyer, so you're my future lawyer. So Troy's been joining us for the last few minutes of the show. So felicidades. Always keep up with what you're doing, Jose. Proud of you, brother. And I mean it, man. You're definitely one of our rising stars, and look forward to seeing you in the governor's mansion in Austin one of these years. And bigger and better things are for you, and continue to support our brothers and sisters in East Texas. Thank you so much for joining the Race Talk Show, and have a wonderful day.